Hello and welcome back to the channel, me and my bowel cancer. This is the second part of the introduction. This is also the third time I've tried to make it. First time it came up with there was something wrong with the file. Once I'd finished recording it. Second time, which was yesterday, it came up with not enough space and deleted the whole thing. So I've had to faff around with the computer, but fingers crossed this is going to work. So anyway, end of the first part of the introduction was when I'd arrived at Aberdeen Royal Infirmary, accident and emergency, taken in by ambulance. So now in this part, certain orders may be wrong. It may come a bit jumbled, but that is how my memory was. I spent a lot of time drugged up to the eyeballs, high on morphine, constantly for basically the whole time I was in hospital, which was 48 days, yeah. So I'm going to do my best and kind of work through it. So anyway, when I got to hospital, they carried out scans. I don't remember actually having the scans. I remember being wheeled in and having to lie there and wait for someone to see me. And then pretty much I don't remember anything after that. Obviously I went for an MRI, but I went for so many of them. The ones I'm remembering maybe were that one. I just don't know. So I do remember them saying something about there being a mass, but that's it. I don't really remember much else. So I think that was the Sunday I got taken in. On the Monday I was put into theatre, and I was basically unconscious for days. So I didn't know what was happening. Nobody had explained anything to me. I just knew that I was sort of half coming round, so that my brain was working. It wasn't a case I was just out. I couldn't open my eyes or move or anything like that, but my brain was activating. And I was panicking. I mean, sheer terror that I was in hospital and nobody knew. I knew they would have told my estranged wife, but had anybody told my kids? Now she actually went and changed the next of kin from her to my eldest daughter, and but I didn't know this. I didn't know anybody knew, my brothers or anything like that. So a couple of days of being unconscious and burst open basically. They did kind of manage to communicate with me, and I managed to convince them to bring me round so I could ask questions, because I didn't know what the hell was going on. So they brought me around. I was in ICU. They brought me around. They removed all the tubes and that. And lo and behold, my older brother's sitting there with my uncle. I hadn't been on my own at all. And my daughter had been in with my son, and they'd sat with me for several hours, and everyone was kind of taking turns. But I'd gone from being wheeled into hospital to all of a sudden I'm completely out of it. I don't know what's happening. Nobody's told me anything. So I managed to start asking questions. Now, it turned out I had a 9 centimetre tumour in my bowel. It completely blocked it off. Sorry, runny nose, it's not exactly warm here today. So a 9 centimetre tumour blocking my bowel completely. So they removed a 30 centimetre section of my bowel, which, it's a fair bit, but you've got 1.5 metre of bowel. But when they opened me up, my appendix had ruptured and my insides were filled with sepsis basically, which very nearly killed me. So they had to remove my appendix at the same time. But of course, things didn't go right because there was these other complications, and I ended up back in getting operated on several times. Now, in total there were, I think it was 10 operations, roughly 50 hours worth I was on the table. When they removed the bowel, they did reconnect everything, obviously without that 30 centimetre section, closed me up, and then of course that joint started leaking, which also almost killed me. So I was back in, sliced and diced again, and I got my stoma, which is another complete story of living with that thing. I'll maybe do that in the next video. Sorry. I'm just quickly checking my notes there. So so I was in and out the operating table multiple times, basically living in ICU, and then they shifted me to HDU, High Dependency Unit, which at Aberdeen Royal Infirmary is Ward 217, and I loved that place. The nurses in there were just amazing. It really was just fantastic. The care you get, second to none. And if it hadn't been for all the morphine I was on, I would have remembered all the names and recommended them for what they do in NHSG is the Daisy Award, which is basically recognise the staff, whether it's receptions, nurses, cleaners, anything, recognises them for the extra care, and I promise you every single one of them in Ward 217 deserves it. But I can't remember their names. I was so baked, but they were just fantastic. So with the multiple operations and things not going very well, I don't know how accurate it is, but I had a cage on me. It was a bloody solid thing right around my stomach and covering half my chest as well, I think. And I had a vacuum pump. I think basically I was still open. They'd had to leave me open so that, rather than slicing every single time. And this vacuum pump was kind of holding, it was like shrink wrap, and it was basically holding me together. I don't know all the ins and outs of it. I was never really compos mentis to ask about it. But I do remember having that thing, and because I remember lying in bed and just kind of knocking on this thing because it was solid. So I had all those operations. That was in January. I think the last one was on the 29th of January. Obviously, having all the operations, I was nil by mouth. And I lost 5.5 stone. A further 5.5 stone. So I'd gone from 22.5 stone, lost a stone in November, December, and then lost a further 5.5, maybe a little bit more. I think I was into the 15s at one point. Now it was mostly muscle. Obviously I'd lost any fat there was, but I was so weakened between being bedbound, so zero exercise, and the lack of food coming in. Obviously I was getting fed through an IV, but it wasn't enough to keep a big chap like me going. So, excuse me. I was in HDU for 19 days in total. Didn't want to leave when I did. I got moved down to Ward 206, which is my sister-in-law's old ward. She was a nurse there before she moved abroad with my brother. Didn't particularly enjoy that ward. I mean, staff were fantastic again. They were still absolutely lovely. Didn't like the ward. Far too hot. But I was also, because I was so drugged up on everything, I was hallucinating a lot. Now, some people have bad trips, I suppose. Mine were all good. Mine were great. I remember now my computer skills are, I play games. And one of them, Farming Simulator, and you've got the map. Well, I'm lying there on my bed, maybe being wheeled along to go get a scan or something. The maps are moving on the roof obviously not there. They're just plain white tiles on the roof. I'm seeing the maps. I thought it was great. I remember seeing, it was an actor basically, come bursting into my area where my bed was and just went, oh, and walked off. I know it wasn't real because, it's an actor. He wasn't there. It was just, I had a great time. I've seen writing on walls and all sorts of things when I know there was nothing there. But yeah, some people do have it bad. I had it good. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, to be honest. So I was on morphine for pretty much all the time I was there. They moved me on to the liquid, the drink. And along with paracetamol, and there was times I was on antibiotics and all sorts of things. I was so many different fluids and tablets and things like that I was taking. I was getting antibiotics through drips. I was getting food through the IV as well. Still got marks where all these bloody needles were. I've been out of hospital 2.5 months now. So, like I say, I was getting food through a bag. They started weaning me off it. I was getting to, I say eat. It was more drink, soup, strained soup. So there was absolutely no solids in it. It wasn't actually bad. But could have done with a pinch of salt. that's another story. They basically got me off of the food bag, and I was to eat proper meals and finally get to drink things. And the food was just dire. Absolutely dire. All my favourites, would come up: mince and potatoes, sweet and sour chicken, things like that. And they ruined every single one of them. The chicken would turn up, it was like bullets. It was solid and dry and just disgusting. The mince was tasteless and actually dry as well. So I thought, right, I'll shift over to having salads. How wrong can you go with a salad? Well, having an egg salad or a tuna salad, they're meant to have mayo in them. I don't think there was mayo in them. Everything was dry. It was just awful. The only thing that was actually good was the coleslaw they would put on. It actually tasted quite nice. So I would eat that along with whatever I could manage that the coleslaw would kind of wet for me. And then that was it. I was just eating nothing. So there was a problem with the fact that I was not putting weight on. And the doctors came and saw me and said, look, we're going to have to put a tube through your nose down to your stomach to feed you. No, you're not. We don't have a choice. You're not eating. And I'm like, well, they'd given me this stuff called Ensure. I'd had it once. When the first time they offered it to me, I'm like, yeah, I'll try a fruit flavoured one. I mean, how wrong can it be? It was really wrong. I felt sick for 2 days. I couldn't eat anything because of it. It was disgusting. I couldn't even finish it. It was only a 300ml bottle or something like that, 330ml. And I said, nah, that's just awful. So when they said they were putting this tube in, I was like, no, it's not happening. I said, yeah, it is. It's happening tomorrow. So that was it. Once the doctor buggered off, I was straight on the phone messaging my daughter, explained to her. And I said, there's no way it's happening. So she phoned up the hospital and spoke with my nurse. And the nurse said, well, he's refused the Ensure. So of course my daughter came back to me and said this. And I said, I didn't refuse it. I refused that flavour, but there's multiple flavours. I'm quite happy to try another one. So she got back in touch with the nurse again and said, if you give him a try, you could give him the option on other flavours. So she came and saw me and she says, we thought you'd just rejected it completely. I said, no, it was just that one. It was disgusting. I said, what's the other flavours? And I was like, there was iced coffee, there was vanilla, there was banana, there was strawberry, and there was quite a few. So I said, I'll have banana, I'll try vanilla. and they were much smaller bottles as well. They were maybe just 200 ml. Three gulps gone, and it was actually nice. So I was having 3 to 4 of these a day. They were delighted. Of course, I was getting this Ensure is basically a meal replacement. So that was me. I was getting 3 to 4 meals a day. They were delighted. I started putting on weight. They were quite happy. So I then had to start dealing with physical torture. They were lovely, really, really nice. I was in quite a bad way, strength-wise, because I'd been chopped open so much. My core muscles, and the fact I'd lost all the weight in muscle, my core muscles were gone. So I couldn't really sit up without assistance, and trying to stand up, going from sitting to standing, was hellish. I ended up with a Zimmer frame, which I didn't keep very long, I must admit. Excuse me, they took it away, gave me a walking stick. But I wasn't allowed to walk anywhere on my own. But they were like, you've got to do things to get yourself, open your lungs back up. I was given all these breathing exercises and things like that. You need to open your lungs back up, and you need to walk. That's the best way of doing it, etc., etc. So it did build up. But I was, they're like, when do you get out of bed in the morning? Sit in the seat, have your breakfast. Well, don't bloody eat breakfast. And then, I could go back to bed, and that would give them a chance to change sheets and things like that. And it was just things like that. They wanted me to get up every meal, sit in the seat. And then I was starting to walk. I wasn't walking very far. I mean, if I could manage 20 metres without being absolutely exhausted and having to hold on to walls and the walking stick to keep me upright because I was ready to collapse, then that changed pretty quickly. I mean, I must admit, I did pushed myself. I then ended up so it was a young lad and a young lassie that dealt with me with physio, and then at the end there was another chap that I dealt with, and I only saw him once, and he basically discharged me. And he just wanted me to climb stairs. All he would, walk to the staircase, climb 5 stairs without the walking stick. And that was it. Did that, half killed me doing it, but I did that. That was it, discharged from physio. So I was getting pretty close to being able to come home. Obviously I still had a couple of days and things like that, but because I'd been putting on weight, I was able to walk. They passed me for being able to walk without having someone with me all the times. So on February the 19th I was discharged from hospital, sent home. So my daughter picked me up from hospital, packed all my bags in it, and she has been an absolute angel. And my son, he actually moved home with me because I couldn't really get about. After about 3 days at home, I tried to make a coffee in the morning, and I had to hobble my way back to my bedroom and shout on my son, say, could you finish making the coffee, because I can't stand there long enough. Just waiting for a kettle to boil, and I couldn't do it. So it was hard. Ended up with rails getting put in, which half of them I've removed now. But it was really difficult. Learning to deal with the stoma, because in hospital it was all dealt with for me. I had a couple of incidents with that. Went to empty it one time, I think it was the day after I got released. Opened it up. Now I was sitting on the loo because I'd gone for a pee, and I thought, right, I'll clear this out. I had a wee bowl. I went to empty it into it, and it went in the bowl and came straight back out and just decorated the floor. Of course, I'm sitting there on the loo. The hell did I do? I couldn't move because it was behind my feet, and I couldn't move myself to get up to deal with anything. Ended up grabbing a towel, making myself decent, covering myself up, and then having to shout at my daughter. She came through, she cleared everything up. I just felt so bad. It felt so weak, so run down. And it was a difficult time, to be honest, to start with. And I remember saying to my daughter, because she's like, right, you need to have get cleaned. I says, there's no way I can stand in the shower. I says, even my handrails, there's no way I can do it. She says, well, what I'll do is, we'll sit in the seat. I'll, do your arms, your back, and things like that, and your feet. And she says, and then you can do your privates once I've left. She says, no, not happening. I says, I cannot let you see me being this weak. And she came back. Now, this was done by text message. She came back to me saying, you are not weak. You've just survived. You've fought for your life through all these operations and that. She says, you are anything but weak. It just broke my heart. It was such a lovely thing for her to say. But yeah, so, things have obviously improved a lot since then. But about a week after I came home from hospital, I'd started seeing obviously the community nurses, and in the wound, at the top of the wound, at the bottom of the wound, a couple of holes appeared. Now, when I'm saying holes, sort of thing you could fit a cotton bud in, not a finger, but a cotton bud, and then they started to leak a yellow liquid. What the hell's this? So I ended up with wound bags fitted. Still got one of them. The lower two, they healed up. Upper two, one of them healed, and then another one opened up, and it still leaks today. So I'm actually in hospital tomorrow. They're going to flush out the wound and they're going to cauterize it with silver nitrate. Hopefully that's the end of that, and I'll just be left with my stoma, because the stoma I can deal with, but where the wound is and where it's opening and leaking from, it's quite difficult for me to see, to be able to judge for fitting the bag. So I still have to see the community nurses. Let's have a look. So yeah, I'm just having a quick look at my notes here. I was in seeing oncology. Now, it's supposed to get chemo because it was stage 3C. Basically, they'd removed all the cancer, but it caused so much damage to the muscle and the tissue surrounding it. There's a pretty high chance, 50-50 chance, that the cancer is going to come back. So they say the perfect time for getting chemotherapy is at 8 weeks from when the cancer is removed. So that would have been the beginning of March. But of course, you can't get chemo when you've got an open wound, which I do because of these leaks. There's evidence that the chemo still gives benefit at 3 months, which would have been the start of April. Still had a leak. So it had been agreed that we'd wait till 4 months. There's no evidence of it being an improvement, but we'll give it a try anyway. But like I say, it's still leaking now, and this is why I'm going in. Surgical team have taken over from oncology, and they're going to flush it out. I'm not likely to get chemo unless it does come back. But it also turned out, they said, it's a 50-50 chance of cancer coming back. Getting the chemo might reduce it by 10%. So, not exactly great. Great if I get it. If it had gone ahead and it happened and I got that improvement, brilliant. But because it's such a small possibility of an improvement, I'm not going to lose sleep about not getting it. Now, when I spoke with my surgeon, she actually said, well, I've been kind of generous there. You're probably looking more like 5% improvement, which made me feel that little bit better as well. Yes, it would be great to have it, but no, I'm not going to lose sleep over not getting it. So basically that is us up to date. Like I say, in hospital tomorrow to get it flushed and cauterised. Like I say, silver nitrate. Didn't realise I was a werewolf, but apparently I am. So if you have any questions, any comments, please just post them down below. If you'd like, share, subscribe, whatever, all that stuff that they ask you to do. It'd be great if you could. Hopefully this channel will help someone else who's maybe dealing with a similar situation. I am positive I'm going to be absolutely fine. I will not let it beat me. So if me being that positive can help someone else gain a little reassurance or positivity, absolutely brilliant. Share the page with them, let them see, and they can ask any question, they can have a rant, whatever they want, because it's a shit situation, but we can get through it. So if we do it together, great, absolutely fantastic. So like I say, any comments, any questions, just fire them in down below. I will read everything. I will get back to everyone. Thank you again for joining me. And like I say, I'll do another video on dealing with this stoma, and we'll see how it goes. All right, thanks again. Cheers.